The team setup dialog is displayed after the league setup dialog when creating a league or when you invoke it from the Setup Teams menu. There's a lot you can do on this screen. I'm going to cover the basics of the draft order and the team names first. So what we have on the left hand side here is the draft order. Now on the league setup dialog we could select either sequential or serpentine as our draft order. However, we can change every pick individually. We can import a draft order. Basically, we can change what team is assigned to every pick using this dialog. So let's take a look at how to do that. If I want to, for example, to change the team assigned to the second pick in the draft from Team 2 to Team 4, and then the fourth pick from Team 4 to Team 2, you saw how I did that there. I just click on the team name and I get a combo box that allows me to select the other teams. I'm just going to set it back to the way I had it. If you want to select one of these items here for the drafting styles and other items that you can modify on this dialog, make sure you click on the pick so that you highlight the whole row and not the combo box. Anytime you change the selection in the combo box, you're effectively moving that pick from the current team to the new team that you select, so be careful with that. So let's change some team names. With Team 6 selected up above, I'm going to say new team name, and you can see that it's shown above as I type. Let's do one more so we can see how that works. Again, I click on the pick column, not the combo box, and we'll give this one another brave name, another team. The Reset Draft Order button is used to base the entire draft order off of the round that you have just modified. Note that we're working on round 1 here. So if I modify the order of the draft based on round 1 and then click Reset Draft Order and I've set it to a sequential or serpentine, Draft Predictor will then fix all of the rounds after that to match. So if you don't know your draft order when you first create your file, what you come in and do is you set the order for the first round, click Reset Draft Order. It says, should I reset the draft order based on the first round? Say yes, and it's then done it for the remaining rounds. The other things you can do while on the screen, for Team 1 I'll give the owner a Team Owner 1 name. These are shown on the draft board for who's on the clock. The live draft ID is used when doing live draft updates from My Fantasy League and should be populated if you import it from My Fantasy League. You can also provide the ID here. The trick is there, if you go look at the list of franchises on your My Fantasy League website, they are listed in order and they use a numbering scheme of 4 characters starting with 1. So Team 1 would be 0001, Team 2 would be 0002, and so on. Finally, on each team you can assign the cheat sheet. Now, Draft Predictor comes with 4 types of cheat sheets. We'll talk more about that in another video, but you can use this screen to assign cheat sheets. You can also do that in several other places in the application. One more thing about the draft order, you can change the picks assigned to teams by using these arrows to move them up or down. And if you have a pick that needs to be skipped, you can skip it from here by using this X button. That just means that the pick will be held. You can restore it later by clicking the checkbox to restore the pick. You can skip picks from the main draft board also. This is just another place that you can do that. Now we're going to talk about the drafting style. The drafting style is what controls the prediction engine. So you can change it for each team. I'll show you real quick how to create a new one. Right now every team in this draft is assigned the default drafting style. I'm going to make a clone of the default drafting style, and I'm just going to call it cloned style. And then I'm going to assign it to one of the teams. So Team 5 is now assigned the clone style. You can see it's in bold and no other team is. When I click on another team like Team 4, Team 5 is no longer in bold because it is not using the drafting style that's currently selected. Okay, so what is a drafting style and how do we modify it? The first item is roster allocation. Now all of these numbers you see here are defaulted based on your league setup that you entered. Our league setup said that we had, I believe, one starting quarterback, but we had a roster of 20 players. And so what Draft Predictor has done is it's made sure that we're going to draft 20 players, but it is deciding how many each player should be drafted at each position. And I don't want 2 kickers, and I don't want 2 defenses, so I'm going to change those. Now, what I need to do is I need to make sure that I still add up to 20. So, okay, I guess I'll take 2 tight ends. Let's go ahead and grab another running back and another wide receiver so that it adds up to 20. Now, once I've done this, I want to update the draft priority, which, as you can see at the top, is the next tab, and I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so these are the system defaults for the roster allocation that I entered. So the first column lists the position. When it says RB1, RB2, that is the depth on your team. So RB1 is the highest ranked running back on your team. Most often that's the first running back you draft, but in Keeper and Dynasty leagues it may not be. So what this default drafting style is saying is that I'm going to draft running backs early. Quarterbacks are listed 5th in priority under your first 2 running backs and your first 2 wide receivers. So we start with that premise, but then we have this column called % better to override. So wide receiver 1 has a 3% better to override, and what that means is that wide receiver 1, the highest ranked wide receiver that I draft, needs to have 3% better value than running back 2 in order for me to draft wide receiver 1 before running back 2. You can change the sequence by moving them up and down. So now wide receiver 1 only needs to have a 3% better to override RB1. I'm going to put it back where it was. Let's just scroll through this list so you can see what the default percentages are. You can see I'm not going to grab a tight end unless he's got at least 3% more value than my first quarterback. Moving on down the line here, we see some bigger percentages. My first defense has to be 5% better than my 5th wide receiver. What the program does is it adds these percent values to override. So if you want to know the difference between, say, drafting your 5th wide receiver and your 2nd quarterback, you're talking 3%, 6%, 9%. So that can add up quickly. The final column is percent drop off to override. What this is saying is that if I'm about to lose 33% of the value at wide receiver, in other words, the value is just going to drop off a cliff. So if the next wide receiver available is 33% lower in value than the RB2 that's on the board, then I better grab that wide receiver now. Finally, let's take a quick look at bye weeks. There's a warning system built into Draft Predictor that if you draft more than 33% of the players at a position at the same bye week, it's going to give you a pop-up box that says you can turn this feature off. The draft board shows players that have a questionable bye week problem in red italic. One more thing about the draft priority. At the bottom of the screen is this 3% value. Draft Predictor runs a alternate scenario for your team when you're on the clock. What if I took that wide receiver now, or the best wide receiver available, and wait to take the running back? And it adds those 2 players together and says, in accumulation, I'm going to get better value actually if I flip the order. And so that's called an alternate prediction. And that's not going to override the decision unless the alternate is at least 3% better.